In a small green village lives a young girl named Imani. Orphaned from both parents, Imani is a poor girl who unfortunately did not inherit her late parents' fortune. Her parents were very wealthy, but left her no will. Very soon after her parents' death, her aunts and uncles did not hesitate to deprive her of all her parents' possessions. All they left her was an old house. On her own, she did odd jobs to help finance her studies. She had no one to help her. She was all alone to face her destiny. Her aunts and uncles, after taking all the money, came back to her house to claim the old house again. They demanded that she marry a man of their choice if she didn't want to lose the house. Despite the poor girl's torments, they hardly gave in. If she still wanted to stay in the house, she would just have to give in to their demand to marry this man she didn't even know. With nowhere else to turn, Imani had no choice but to accept. Her aunts and uncles used her to make as much money as they could. She was given in marriage to a charming and very wealthy young man. Thus, through her husband, they benefited from a lot of money. Newton took Imani to town after the wedding. Preoccupied with making lots of money, Newton wasn't too talkative. Now it was Imani's turn to start the conversation. "Can you tell me more about yourself?" she asked. He replied, "I'm very rich, and all I'm concerned about right now is making enough money. As you know, I'm very rich." Imani laughed calmly and replied, "Yes, of course I know. I also know your likes and dislikes." Newton replied, "What I like is money, and what I don't like is being penniless." Surprised by his answer, she replied, "Are there things you hate, routines that are part of your daily life?" He replied curtly, "Are you doing an inspection? Or are you a private detective now?" Imani replied that she just wanted to know a little more about him, given their marital situation. "We're going to be living together, so it's only natural that I should want to get to know you better." At this, the young man replied, "Your aunts and uncles told me you weren't educated, but I can already see the opposite." Imani realized that there was no point in forcing the issue, as he was too busy. She decided to postpone it for another time. "We'll talk later," she said. "I wish you a good night." Newton wished her good night too, and asked her to go to bed in their room. "I've only known one room since I've been here, and it's mine. I didn't know there was a room for us too. I've always slept downstairs," she explained. Newton insisted that she go to her room to get her things and move into their room. She retrieved her belongings, and together they settled in. The next day, very early in the morning, the young woman noticed that her husband was no longer there. Had he already left for work? She wondered. So she set about the housework. She cleaned up and put everything in its place. Then she cooked for herself and her husband. As soon as he was home, she asked him to take a shower and join her at her table. To her surprise, Newton replied, "I'm not hungry. I already ate in town before coming home. You can eat without me." Imani replied sadly, "But I made the food for both of us." The young man replied, "Listen, don't get on my nerves. Don't think you're already my wife. I'm just married to you so I can send you photos when I need them." Dazed, she repeated, "You're married to me for photos?" "Yes," he replied. "It's just for my parents, who keep asking me if I'm not married. At least now I can send them pictures so they'll leave me alone. That's why you slept with me yesterday." Imani then asked him if she could go back to her village as he already had her photos. "No," he replied. "My parents are unpredictable. They can ask me at any time. I can't take that risk." Imani is annoyed and says, "I can't live like this. If I'm married to you, then I have expectations too. If you can't fulfill them, then just let me go back to the village." "Impossible," cried Newton. "I didn't spend so much money to let you go like that. Do you know how much I paid your aunts and uncles to have you?" She asked if he'd married her or bought her. "Well, both," said Newton. "If you can't let me take him to the village, could you help me set up a business? That way I won't be bored at home, and at least I'll have something to do during the day when you're away." "No, I don't have a TV at home for nothing," he replies. "You don't have to work. This house has everything you need. And if you get bored, there's a TV too." Imani now knew what to expect. It was just being used to fool Newton's parents. When he was in the bedroom, Newton's mother called as usual. This time she was addressing her daughter-in-law. "When are you going to give me grandchildren?" "Soon," replied Imani. At the end of the call, Newton asked her, "Why did you say you were going to give her grandsons? You should have said no." "But I did it to help you," she replied. "I just made sure your parents didn't suspect anything." "Well, you shouldn't have said that," he retorted. "I don't feel the need to get married yet, let alone have children. When I'm ready, I'll marry a woman who's really right for me, and with her I'll have my children. But what about me? I'm a woman too, and I have expectations." Newton replied, "You're not of my social standing. What's more, you've got dirty hair and old people's clothes. If my hair and clothes bother you, then I'll find a job myself, so I can get some money and change these old things as you say." He then gave her a lot of money to change her clothes and redo her hair. After the conversation, she again took her belongings and moved downstairs while Newton slept upstairs. She also deposited all the money he'd given her as soon as Newton left for work. "I don't need it. He works all day, so hopefully I can find a job. I won't tell him since he won't help me. I've always got my certificate with me," she thought happily. After applying to several places, she finally found a job in an electronics store. She would be in charge of sales. That evening, when Newton came home, he had forgotten to pay for food. So hungry was he that he went to the kitchen to see if there was anything to eat. Luckily, Imani had prepared it. He helped himself on the sly, and at the first bite, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow, this meal is so delicious. I had no idea she could cook so well. But if I ask her to cook for me, she'll think she's my wife, so I don't want to take that risk." He quickly swallowed a few mouthfuls and hurried to his room before Imani surprised him. That's when he realized that the money he'd given her this morning was still on the bed. "Why didn't you take the money I gave you this morning?" "I don't need it," she replied. "If you don't think of me as your wife, then I don't need to look good for you. I don't consider you my husband either, so you can keep your money." Newton says, "I'm not giving you money for fun. You have to be clean in the photos so that my parents don't suspect anything. They've already made enough remarks about your clothes, so you need to change them. In that case, I'll lend you the money to change your look and hairstyle, but I'll pay you back later," she replied. "Tomorrow when I return from duty, I want to see a difference," he ordered. Imani asked if she could leave now, and he replied that she could sleep here if she wanted, or in her room. She went off to her room to sleep. The next day, Newton went to the service as usual. Imani also went her own way, making sure she got home as quickly as possible before Newton arrived. She also bought herself some new clothes and changed her hair as he had requested. In the evening, Newton had forgotten to pick up his keys, so he knocked on the door and Imani came to open it. Instead of going inside, he just stood there watching her. He only came back to earth when Imani said, "You've been here for 3 minutes now. If you don't want to go inside, then tell me to close the door. Wow, you look beautiful tonight, and you've got a wonderful figure," he admired. Now please go home, Imani asked him. I haven't got all day. I'm watching a film. Newton entered, but kept staring at her. He even asked her to serve him some food, saying he was very hungry. Since when do you eat my food? You said you didn't want any, so I didn't cook. He then asked her to cook for him while he took his bath. Imani didn't know what to make that evening, as she hadn't planned to cook. Finally, she decided to make instant noodles for Newton. As he ate, he was attracted only by her beauty. All he could do was stare at her and say to himself, "She looks really beautiful tonight." Her look emphasized her curves so much. He tried to concentrate, to think of the money. But that beautiful face kept troubling him and coming back into his thoughts. He then asked her to sleep in their rooms when she'd finished watching her film. But Imani was annoyed. "I don't feel like it. I'd rather sleep in my room. You're my wife. I'm your husband, and you have to do what I ask. So tonight you'll sleep in our room." Imani wondered if he had a problem. First he'd eaten her food, and now he wanted her to sleep in their room. She replied that she wouldn't come because she felt more comfortable in her room. "Look, I'm the one who decides," continued Newton. And without further ado, he began to take Imani's things back to her room. A husband and wife have to sleep in the same room. And that's what we are. From now on, you'll have to stay here and sleep there. You can forget your room. "But what's happening to you tonight?" asked Imani. "Just turn off the TV and come and sleep next to your husband." Against Imani's wishes, she turned off the TV, and that night they slept arm in arm like true lovers. All day long, the young man couldn't stop wondering what was going on with him. Normally, he'd only married Imani for the photos, but now he's really attracted to her. How did I end up liking a peasant girl? This wasn't my plan, he repeated to himself in his head. I've got to concentrate on my work and forget about this girl. She's not even of social standing. A respectable man like me shouldn't be interested in an ordinary girl like her. For his part, Imani was also wondering. How could he change his mind so quickly? I hope I have nothing to fear from him. With people like that, you can expect anything. That day, Newton decided to hurry home. He'd been so distracted at work that all his thoughts returned to the young woman. When he arrived, he found that she wasn't there. 1, 2, 3 hours passed, and she still hadn't returned. Angry, he wondered where she could be. He went out to see if she was around. He saw a car approaching the house from a distance. He went into the house because it was Imani inside the car. When she entered the room, he was already waiting for her, furious. "Where have you been, madam?" From Newton's angry red face, she already knew she could expect anything. "I went to get something," she replied, trembling. "Where is this thing?" Newton asked. "I ate it on the way. It was food." With a look of disgust on his face, he said, "Not only are you a liar, you're also a prostitute. What can you look for to eat for more than 3 hours? Don't you know you're a married woman? And who was it who brought you back?" "It was just to help me, that's all," she explained. "And I'm not a prostitute." "And you're a cheap prostitute," Newton exclaimed. "Can't you think of something better to do?" An annoyed Imani replied, "Yes, I'm a prostitute. Now why do you care? Aren't we just married for the pictures? I'm free to do what I want and manage my life as I see fit. I use my body to prostitute myself, not yours." The young man replied, "It's not just your body anymore. It's mine too. I paid good money for your dowry. You're mine. I have every right over you because you belong to me." "Now why does that make you so angry?" asked Imani. "You've always told me that you planned to marry a woman who suited you, and with her, you'd have your children. so let me do what I want too. Listen, young lady, Newton continued. From now on, you're not going out to buy anything. If you have to leave this house, it will be with me. I don't trust you anymore. I'm not a prostitute and I never will be. I'm a woman with principles and values, so I won't allow you to treat me like one. You don't have to forbid me to do anything. All right, enough talk. I'm going to try and believe what you're telling me today. Now make me something to eat. From now on, I'll eat breakfast, lunch, and even dinner at home. I won't pay outside anymore. Okay, I'll do it if that's what you want. She went into the kitchen to cook for him. As soon as the meal was served, Newton refused to eat alone. He told her that she should join him and eat together. Despite the young woman's protests, she finally gave in, since she knew there was no point in arguing with him. They ate together and slept together in their room. Newton had been coming home every afternoon for a month now, but his wife was never at home. He didn't tell her because he wanted to carry out his investigations on his own. He decided to devote a day to following her around and seeing where she went every day. The next morning, instead of going to the service, he waited in his car without Imani noticing. When she finished getting ready, she got out and took a cab. Newton followed the cab, and she eventually got off in front of a store. Newton wondered what his wife would do in front of a store. She went in and started selling as she did. Newton realized that she was actually working there. He was pleased. At least she's not cheating on me, he said. If I'd confronted her, it might have gone badly. I'm glad she works here. He then went home to rest, feeling very tired from stressing over nothing. Now he has peace of mind. When Imani returned that evening, she found that Newton had already gone home. His car was parked outside. She knew he would be furious again, and that this time there was no way out. She went into the bedroom to drop off her bag, but Newton was still there. "So where were you this time?" Newton asked. "Don't tell me you went shopping again, because I've been home all morning, but you weren't. I didn't feel well. I wasn't feeling well. I had a fever and a terrible headache, so I went home to rest. That's why I stayed home. And could you give me a convincing reason why you hadn't been home since morning?" Imani replied, "Let me get you some medicine," ignoring the second part of his sentence. "No, don't bother," cried Newton. "I've already taken the medicine and now I feel much better. Now don't pretend to ignore my question. Just tell me where you've been. If you don't answer me, then I'll leave the house for good and you won't see me again." "Don't do that," she replied. "I know you won't be happy to know where I've been and what I've been doing, but please don't think I'm a prostitute. In fact, I went to work. I got a job as a store assistant. I was really bored at home, and I've got all my diplomas, so why should I stay at home and do nothing? Then I'd be able to earn my own money, and my diploma would be useful too." Newton said to him, "Why should my wife work as a sales representative?" "How do you know I'm a sales rep?" wondered Imani. "And why do you keep calling me your wife?" She didn't understand. "Look, Imani, at first I married you just to fool my parents, so I could send them photos every time, but now I've changed my mind. You mean a lot more to me because I've fallen in love with you. If your desire is to work, then I won't stop you. But this time you'll work with me in my office. So our office," he corrected. Imani was surprised. "I don't know what to tell you. I'm amazed at what you're saying. Refresh yourself and get ready. We're going out," he suggested. "I'm very tired today and I don't feel like going out," she replied. "Okay, next time then." Imani was happy. She thought to herself, "He's in love with me now." I wondered when that moment would come. and to think I'm in love with him too. I'll make sure he doesn't realize it. I'll try to turn him and my aunts and uncles around a bit first. Since I've been here, I've been happy in a way he could never have imagined. I was supposed to suffer, but instead, I'm very happy. I'm in heaven." She went to sleep that night very happy. The next day, as agreed, Newton took her to the mall to do some shopping and also to get her hair done. He was now so attentive and caring that she wondered if he really was the same man she'd married. When they had finished shopping, they went home to get ready for their romantic evening. While they were there chatting, Newton knelt down in front of her, pulled out a ring and asked, "Do you want to be my wife?" There were so many people there that evening, and everyone was admiring them. She laughed and replied, "No, we're already married." Newton replied, "Will you be my love? Will you love and cherish me as your husband?" She laughed again. "You can't even make a declaration. You don't know anything anymore except your business," she replied, amused. But the young man wasn't joking. He was really serious, so he continued, "I'm in love with you, and are you in love with me too?" "Get up," she finally said. She kissed him and said, "I've had a wonderful evening, but I'm tired of laughing so much, so let's go home." She held out her ring finger to Newton, who put the ring on her finger. Everyone applauded, and you could see in the eyes of the girls present the desire to be in Imani's shoes. On the way home, Newton said to her, "You almost made a fool of me today at the mall, so I'm not going to be reminded of your annoying request," says Imani, laughing. "What would you like to eat tonight? I still haven't digested the ice cream I had tonight at the mall, so I don't want to eat anything." He headed upstairs and Imani followed him. "But I'm just kidding with you," she replied. "I want to be left alone, so leave me alone." She said, "Okay, good night. I'm going to sleep in my room tonight." Newton replied, "Yes, good night. Don't talk to me tomorrow either." Imani said, "Oh, he's angry, my lovely husband. You're so beautiful like that. I love you. Sleep well." At these words, he stood up abruptly. "Please repeat what you just said." "But I thought you were already asleep," she scoffed. "Don't you sleep anymore?" "Please repeat it," Newton almost begged. "I love you, my lovely husband." He was very happy to hear Imani tell him she loved him. He took him in his arms, showered him with kisses, and they kissed. Tonight was different. They slept together, but this time as true lovers. The next day they both got ready and Newton took him to his company. When he was inside, she couldn't help exclaiming, "Wow, it's so beautiful here. This place is beautiful. Is this your company, or do you just work here?" She couldn't believe it. She'd never seen anything so big and beautiful. Newton told her that this was his company, and from now on she'd be working here too. Teasingly, he said, "You'll be my employee, but I won't pay you any money." Imani began to laugh. "I'd rather do that than sit at home every day doing nothing. Besides, I could admire you all the time." "I agree with you," he replied. "You work here, but I'll be on the other side so we can concentrate better." He introduced her to the company's staff and showed her around and everything she would need to know about her new job. The inspection over, they headed home. At home, Newton's mother called. She said, "I'm very angry with you, Imani. You don't want to give me grandsons like you told me." Imani replied, "Good night, Mum. When are you coming back?" "Not before you give him grandsons," she replied. Then she said, "Mommy, it's your son who doesn't want to have children yet. He doesn't want to touch me. Give him the phone. I want to see his face." Newton immediately replied, "No, Mum. I'm ready to have as many children as you want." Confused, she said. Since you won't make up your mind, I'll give you a year to introduce me to my grandson or granddaughter. After a year, I'll come and visit you and your father to see our granddaughter. Consider it done, Mum, replied Imani. They wished each other good night and ended the call. Suddenly he asked her, "Why did you tell Mom you'd give her a grandson or granddaughter in a year? And why did you tell her I wasn't touching you?" "I just said what was," she replied. "Have you ever touched me before? Or were you waiting for me to make the first move?" Newton said, "You could have told me if you wanted to. I didn't want to move too fast with you, let alone do something you wouldn't want to do." "Will you ever be able to be a little romantic?" she asked. "Well, you want me to be an entrepreneur, so I will. You'll be the first to ask me to stop. Come into my arms," he replied. Tonight they shared their first intimate night. Together they worked hard to take their businesses to the next level. But that wasn't all. He also built several successful businesses in different towns. Together they went to Imani's village to collect all the goods sold by his parents. Everyone admired Imani. She was radiant. Who would have thought that she would have become so beautiful and magnificent when people thought she would have a sad life ahead of her? They were very much mistaken. She had changed completely and was no longer the same Imani who had lived sadly in the village. Despite the torments of her aunts and uncles, she hardly gave in. They'd done her a lot of harm like that. Together with her husband, they set up a business in Imani's village. They lived happily together, and months later, Imani found she was pregnant. It was wonderful, incredible news. She later gave birth to a baby boy, and her daughter-in-law visited her with her father-in-law as they had planned. They were overjoyed to find that he now had their grandson. They were a close-knit, happy family. Imani's aunts and uncles had hoped to ruin her by forcing her to marry a man she didn't know, but in the end, it worked in their favor. Newton and his family lived happily ever after. If you like this story, leave me a little encouragement and tell me in the comments which country you're following me from.